All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's a month of service presentation of property taxes, protest valuations, exemptions, and payment options. My name is Mia Murray, and I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods and the Harris Central Appraisal District, the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, Lone Star Legal Aid, the Earl Carl Institute, the Texas Legal Services Center, and Houston Volunteer Lawyers. And collectively, we make up a month of service. And basically, a month of service is the collaboration of all of our organizations coming together on a monthly basis and offering a variety of different workshops relative to asset building, asset protection, community empowerment, and the maintaining of generational wealth. Um, we know that there are a lot of underserved communities that are out there that don't have access to a lot of information, that don't know where to go for available resources. So we collaborated several years ago in an effort to hopefully, reach more people, create a larger impact, and get as much information out to the community as we possibly can. That's kind of, why we're here. And today we're here to talk about property taxes and the protest. Protest season is among us. So throughout the course of the protest season, the appraisal district and the tax collector assessor's office have workshops around the city relative um, to telling people about the protest process,
Oh
various
my
exemptions that can
God.
save them money. Oh my gosh. Okay. And so again, trying in an effort to try to get as much information out to the community. So as you're going through the protest process or interested in protesting, that you'll know what the process is like, how your tax values are actually, or how your taxes are assessed, how they come up with that valuation process, the exemptions that can save you money, and if you find yourselves in some kind of financial bind or what have you, what options are available for you to make those property tax payments to prevent your home from going into foreclosure or into some kind of default. So, with that being said, there's a lot of information that's going to be covered here today. Do know that the information that we do present here for you is for educational purposes only. If you do find yourselves in need of any kind of assistance, we do encourage you to reach out directly to all of our partners so that your particular issue can be addressed. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions of the experts from the tax office and the tax assessor collector's office. We do ask that you try to keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can, as we are on a public platform. We are recording this session as well as broadcasting live on our social media pages on YouTube. So we do want to try to protect your privacy as much as we can. So we don't want you to divulge any personal detail information and giving your address and things of that nature. So do keep that in mind. If you are joining us on Zoom, you have the opportunity to put your questions into the chat, and there are experts that are monitoring the chat that will be able to uh, answer your questions for you. If your questions are again really detailed and really personal, then you'll be instructed with some contact information on someone that you can talk to outside of this forum to address your personal issue. In addition to that, if you are joining us on YouTube, you have the opportunity to type your question into the chat. Sorry, into the comment section, and I will definitely make sure that I answer your question aloud. Yeah, at the end of the presentation, so that way that question will be addressed as well. So, with that being said, we're going to move on into our introductions, and do know that again, with this session being recorded, I will be sending out a link of the recording to everyone, along with any resources that are mentioned throughout the presentation, so that you all will be able to have that after this presentation, so that you can go back and rewatch it or share it with someone else that may also find the information to be beneficial. So with that being said, we're going to kind of go out a little bit out of order this time. So we're going to have the tax assessor's office to present first for you today, and then we're going to get into the appraisal district's presentation. So Ms. Mabel, we're going to have you introduce yourself and your team first, and then Shay will have you introduce, and then you can go on into your presentation. So Ms. Mabel.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see, am I on? Let me make sure I'm on. Oh, there I am.
You're on. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Mabel Menifee, and I'm with the Harris Central Appraisal District, as Nia mentioned. And I'm also here with several of my co-workers, Sarah Hatch, and Alicia Bryan, who are both senior staff members in our residential property division, as well as Linda Lightco, who is also a senior staffer in the exemptions department of HCAD. Now, you ask why we have those two sections those two departments that are divided. Today, we're going to talk about property tax protest, and Sarah and Alicia are part of that process in terms of working with the teams being part of the teams that evaluate your property and set market values. So they can talk to you about issues related to filing your protest. And we're going to go through those. And then Linda is with our exemptions department. And as you know, exemptions play an important role in how your property taxes are calculated. So there's always a lot of questions about that sort of fit into this whole process. I do want to mention that for those of you who are joining us today, this is going to be, we've had a series of property tax protest workshops going on for the last 6 or 7 weeks. And so this is kind of the last one where we're going to be able to utilize the expertise within our residential property division for the most part. Why? Because, as you know, the protest deadline and hearings begin in a few days, and those guys are going to be knee deep in working with the folks who have filed the protest with hearings and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for joining us today. And also, I want to add that one of my additional colleagues that can help answer some of the questions, John Labus, is also in the chat. He'll be able to assist. And we will get back to you shortly. I'm gonna switch it over to Shay Pentowski. We're going a little bit out of order, but essentially the reason that the two of us present together is because we are the valuation and administration of exemptions side of the property tax coin. The tax assessor collector, whether that's Shay's office with the Harris County tax assessor collector or one or more of the others, they're the ones responsible. They send out that they calculate your tax bill, send them out, and then in terms of payment and collection options, those are the folks you would be working with. So thank you again for joining us, and I am now going to turn it back over to Shay Pinkowski of the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate it. My name is Shay Pinkowski, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Office of Annette Ramirez. We're your Harris County Tax Assessor Collectors, and our job as the Tax Assessor Collector's Office is to be able to calculate and send out those bills for you timely in order to give you the required time to pay your property taxes every year. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by sharing my screen. Let's see. So recently, we just last November elected our newest property tax assessor collector for Harris County. Miss Annette Ramirez has served in the property tax collecting business for about over 20 years now. She's a great wealth of knowledge. We're super excited to have new ideas and new things coming into fruition through our office. So we're very excited to have her. But if you voted last November for a tax assessor collector, Miss Annette Ramirez is the newest tax assessor collector for Harris County. So you'll be hearing her name a lot. All of the mail that you would get from our office from January forward would be under her name. If you paid your property taxes already and you used our previous tax assessor's name, that's not a problem at all. We still accept the payments as a prior tax assessor, so don't worry about it. But just so you're aware, instead of receiving the bill that you're normally used to seeing from Ann Harris Bennett, you'll now be receiving a bill for Annette Ramirez. So as I mentioned earlier, the Harris County Tax Office is responsible for providing you with your property tax bills every year. In addition to that, though, our office is also responsible for registration and titling of vehicles. So whenever you purchase a new vehicle, you're gifted one or you gift one, our office is the one that primarily handles the initial paperwork side of that, along with getting your registration stickers and ensuring that all of that is up to par whenever you're going through that process. And in addition, we also manage and maintain the voter roll for registered voters in Harris County. So whenever you register to vote, you can do so through our office, and our office manages that as well. Just as a quick note for our auto side, with vehicle registrations, we are no longer requiring a safety test on your vehicle. However, Harris County is an emissions county, so we are still required to request that you submit your vehicle's emissions test whenever you go to renew or transfer the title of your vehicle into your name. So just be aware, if you're going to be doing that vehicle registration process, that you submit in or that you go and have the test done for your emissions test. As an overview, Harris County collects and maintains property taxes for approximately 1.7 million tax accounts. Harris County is enormous. That equates to almost $8 billion in property, more than $8 billion in property taxes. And that is because we collect taxes for over 80 jurisdictions. A lot of times you'll see the Harris County jurisdictions on there principally. So you'll see Harris County, along with occasional City of Houston, Houston ISD, the Harris County Flood Control District, in addition to some emergency services districts, along with other schools, not just Houston ISD. So when you see our bill, normally you'll see an itemized list of jurisdictions that are collected for your property. And just so you know, we might not collect all the taxes for your property. You might have a school district that's outside of our collections. You might have an ESD or a MUD, a municipal water district. So, just be aware that while we do collect for a great number of the jurisdictions that property taxes are collected on, we don't necessarily collect for all. But a lot of what we do is equal across the board. So if our county office does it, then your other jurisdictions will do it as well. But for specific instructions, you'll want to reach out to every assessor collector that collects on your property. But for our office, we collect for a great number of those. So as of the last 4 years, you've seen quite a lot of changes to your property taxes due to laws that change and laws that continuously change. In addition to, inclusive to that is increases to your property tax exemptions. Now, property tax exemptions are what reduces your taxable value, which then lowers how much you pay in your property taxes. So these increases have been really great for a lot of folks who are struggling to pay for their property taxes. But that included going from $229,000 and to $320,000 for your over 65 or disabled exemption homesteads for Harris County. City of Houston also increased their exemption for over 65 or disabled exemptions for homesteads, and that went from 164 years ago to 260 as of just last year. The general homestead exemption for all schools increased from $25,000 4 years ago to $100,000 this past year, and it might increase again next year. But we'll find out more about that later on in the year. Your homestead exemption is now eligible to be prorated, meaning that instead of having to wait for the first full year in which you occupy your home to have that homestead exemption placed on it, you can now have it from the date in which you move into your property and assume ownership of that. So that helps a lot of folks as well. It might not be the full year of property tax exemptions, but it definitely does help in order to reduce your taxes. So these are a lot of bills that have come into effect in the last 4 years, and a lot of them have been a great help for those who are trying to pay their property taxes and to pay less on their property taxes. Now, our office, as I mentioned before, is the office responsible for calculating your tax bill and then mailing it out to you. So when we mail out your tax bill, this is what you're going to be seeing come this October, November, and towards December of this year. And it'll include that itemized list at the top section there where it has every jurisdiction that is applicable to your property, along with what exemptions are applicable to those jurisdictions and how that bill was calculated to total up to your total amount due. This bottom part here is what you'll often hear referred to as a coupon. And a coupon is the section that is perforated. You can tear it out, submit it in along with a copy of your check if you're mailing that payment in, or if you'd prefer to just rather keep your record information at home as opposed to carrying it with you, you can bring this part into the office with you if you were choosing to make a payment in person, and that would assist you in being able to make sure that that payment is being collected properly, because we're able to locate your account with that information. So you'll be seeing this a lot here come November whenever we have this bill sent out for you, but this is what you'll be used to seeing from us. In addition to receiving your statements by mail, you also have the option of receiving this to an email. Now, it is a one or the other type of situation. If you request for your statements to be mailed or to be emailed to you through our website, then that's perfectly fine. But just be aware, if you're having it emailed to you, you will not have it mailed to you as well. It's one or the other. Alternatively, if you do not have it set for electronic statements, you would normally receive that bill to you in the mail. So it is an optional process. You're not required to do it, but some folks do prefer to have that sent to them electronically in order to be able to keep up, especially if they travel a lot or they're out of state. And it helps a lot of folks with that, with avoiding those issues with, mail not being delivered, post office problems, mailboxes being broken into. I heard that a lot last year. So this might be a little peace of mind. Alternatively, you can always find your tax statement online on our website, which is at www.hctax.net there at the bottom. So if you're in doubt, or it comes to be, late November and you're unsure of what's going on with your property taxes, or if the mail is just taking forever, you're always welcome to check online. So our office calculates your tax bill for you, meaning our information that we collect based off of is all what the Harris Central Appraisal District provides to us. So your taxable value is your property tax value without any or with whatever exemptions are applicable to your account reduced from it. Your tax rates are determined by every jurisdiction that collects on behalf of your property. So every jurisdiction has their own tax rate. No one has the exact same one, unless, all of their math is the exact same. But every jurisdiction has to calculate those every year. So those tax rates change. But we take that taxable value and multiply it by your tax rate, and that's how we determine how much your tax bill is. So whenever you see something like an exemption, that reduces how much your taxable value of the property is, and therefore reduces your tax bill. But those tax rates, fluctuate with time, and it's always going to depend on the jurisdictions themselves. So, just keep an eye on that. They're able to go and put that information on their website as they update it. So just as a visual, as I mentioned before, with exemptions, it reduces how much you pay in your taxes because those exemptions reduce how much your property's taxable value is. So for a tax bill on a property of $342,000, you would anticipate to pay almost a little bit over $7,000 on your tax bill without any exemptions on that property. And of course, this depends on which jurisdictions are applicable to you. But just as a general, for a numbers idea, that's approximately how much you would pay for your property taxes. Now, when you add that homestead property exemption to that property, it gets reduced by a little over $2,000. So instead of paying a little over $7,000, you would pay a little or almost $5,000, which is a pretty big difference. But then in addition to that, when you have the homestead and an over 65 or a homestead and a disabled exemption, homeowner exemption, that those taxes get reduced greatly. So instead of paying, a little over 7,000, you would pay almost not even near $2,000. You would pay 1,500. So these exemptions are here to help. They're here to reduce your property taxes. And if you're eligible for them, we do recommend that you go and apply to have those added to your account because it does help reduce how much you pay in your property taxes, and it helps to alleviate some of that stress that comes from property taxes. So we highly recommend that if you are eligible for a homestead exemption where you live and you own the property that you reside in, that you go and apply for that homestead exemption. If you're homestead exemption and you're over the age of 65 or you have a disability, medical disability, then you're more than welcome to go and apply for that homestead and disabled exemptions. So in order that you can reduce how much you pay for your property taxes every year. In addition to the usual exemptions that we offer all the time, there is also assistance for damaged property when it comes to disaster areas in Harris County. So those only occur whenever we have something happen, like the tornadoes that blew through, the derechos, hurricanes, that sort of thing. So it's good to kind of keep an ear out for those states of emergency or states of disaster, so that you know if you need to go and apply for that assistance for damaged property. You do have to provide us with documentation and proof of this damages in order for the appraisal district to go through with the process of applying it to your account. But that information and the application is available on their website. And as always, whenever you're submitting that documentation, take plenty of pictures. Provide any inspections provided, repair estimates, any other information that you find would be valuable to determining how much the worth of that damage was is something that you'll want to include whenever you submit that application. You'll hear something called a tax limitation, a tax ceiling, or a tax freeze pretty frequently when it comes to that over 65 exemption or disabled exemption on a homesteaded property. And essentially what these do is they limit how much property tax can be collected for schools and along with some other taxing jurisdictions. So it depends on which jurisdictions apply to your property, but it doesn't necessarily apply to all property taxes, but it does apply to your school. And what this does is it limits how much property tax you would pay to that jurisdiction. Meaning if you had the over 65 exemption placed onto your property and that year you paid $300 for your property tax for that school, and the next year your property value increases, the tax limitation, that tax freeze, would limit how much you are required to pay for your property taxes to that school, to that $300 that was whenever you originally had that over 65 and homestead exemption on the property. Alternatively, for instance, if the next year your property taxes are reduced and instead of it calculating to over $300, your property taxes calculate to under $300, let's say 200, then we would collect the 200 because the tax limitation doesn't freeze it at the rate that it is. It limits how much we can collect from you for that jurisdiction. So we can always collect under, we can still collect at less, we just cannot collect at more. So long as there aren't any changes to the exemptions placed onto the property, then that remains the same. This applies to all homesteaded properties with the over 65 exemption or homesteaded with the disabled exemptions on there. So it is something that if you are uncertain of, you can give us a call or you can reach out to our office and we can explain it to you to verify what that amount is. But if you ever look at your bill and the calculations aren't adding up for your homes or for your school, and wonder why you're paying so little for your school, that might be the reason why, is due to that tax ceiling. Another option that we have for over 65 homesteaded properties is something called a tax deferral. And the appraisal district will explain a little bit about this further on. But a tax deferral is a postponement of property taxes, meaning that while you still owe those property taxes to your Harris County, your school, whatever the case may be, you are able to postpone how long it takes you to pay it and reduce how much of an additional fee you would be required to pay in comparison to what it would normally have been with penalty and interest fees. You would pay a 5% interest fee per year, which calculates to a little bit above 1% per month. And that helps greatly in reducing how much additional penalty and interest fees you would collect had you not had the deferral on there. Because even though you're over the age of 65 and you have a homestead on your property, those penalty and interest fees still can accrue if you are delinquent on paying your property taxes. The tax deferral helps with the process of having additional collections fees or the my word or additional issues with your taxes being collected on by our attorneys or foreclosure accounts. If your property taxes are deferred, this cannot happen. You do not go through court. You do not get an additional attorney's fees. And this is a really great assistance for those who are aware that they have taxes to be paid, but they are not able to pay it all by that end of January date that you're normally required to pay at. So it is available to you to apply through the appraisal district, and they can assist you in filling out that documentation. But this is in reference to property which have the homestead along with the over 65 or disabled exemption or disabled veterans exemption. Now, we do recommend that before you do this tax deferral application, that if you're making payments to your property still, if you have a mortgage or an escrow, that you confirm first with your bank that they are allowing you or that they permit you to have this deferral on their property, as not all banks will allow it. Not all financing applications will allow for you to have a deferral on that property, as they have an interest in that property. So if you are making payments and you're interested in getting the deferral, just make sure that you confirm with your bank first before going through that application. Because while we may not be requiring a payment from you during that time, your bank certainly might. So just make sure that you contact your bank first before having that application filled out and submitted. In addition to all of the previous options that we have, for those of us who do not have a homestead on their property, or for those of us who have the homestead but we don't have an over 65, there are alternative payment plans available. We have flexible payment plans anywhere from 12 to 36 months for homesteaded properties, and these can be paid off early. You're not required to keep it to the required times. But they are a great tool in helping you get those taxes paid off in time without having to risk collection efforts or foreclosure efforts at later dates. Payment plans can begin as early as the account is delinquent, and for most of us, that's going to be February 1st. And as I mentioned before, if you have a payment plan set up prior to the account going to our attorney's offices, it stops collection efforts. So we're able to have this payment plan in effect for you to avoid those collection efforts on Harris County taxes. Now, as I mentioned before, homesteaded property payment agreements can be from anywhere from 12 to 36 months. Normally, we recommend that you do it in the scope of a year, so 12, 24, 36. Those terms include a 1% interest fee per month plus initial penalty and interest. So the first month of penalty and interest is 7%. So that's 7%, and then plus the 1% would be an additional fee. All of these fees are calculated into your payment agreement. So when you're making those payments timely, you're also paying off the penalty and interest in order to be able to pay it in full by the time that payment agreement has come to its end. For non-resident homestead properties, so this is going to be for non-residence properties, business or commercial properties, or personal property, you're also able to have a payment agreement, but this one is not going to be extended. This one is going to be a maximum of 12 months. It does accrue the usual penalty and interest, but it helps you avoid those attorney's fees and foreclosure actions. And again, all of these penalty and interest fees are calculated into your agreement. So as you're making those payments, you're also paying off your penalty and interest fees. But it is an option for you. As I mentioned before, you're welcome to pay these payment agreements off earlier than the required or the stated amount on your contract. If you have a 12-month payment agreement and you'd like to pay it off in 6, you are more than welcome to do so. Just make sure that you contact us in regards to what the final payment is so that we're able to get that sorted for you. The earlier you pay it off, the less penalty and interest you pay, at least when it comes to our other payment plans, not the homestead necessarily. Because with the homestead, as I mentioned, you do get a reduction to those penalty and interest fees as opposed to with the usual, which accrues as usual. For our over 65 disabled homeowners and disabled veterans, along with their surviving spouses, we also offer something called a quarterly payment plan. And these quarterly payment plans are very similar to how you would imagine paying off your property taxes timely. So your first payment would be due at the end of January. But what we do is we take your full amount of taxes due to our office. We divide that into 4, and so long as you are paying these 4 payments timely per our requirements on there at the end, which is end of January, March, May, and July, you do not pay any additional penalty or interest on that account. So long as you're able to make those payments timely of that quarter of amount of what you owe fully by the end of January, at the end of March, at the end of May, and at the end of July, we would not collect penalty and interest fees on that account, but it does give you a little bit more time and a little bit of relief when it comes to making those payments, as opposed to paying the full amount in bulk at the beginning or at the end of January. You do get that additional time to make those payments, and it also helps with making sure that you're able to make those payments timely. So it is an option that is available for those homesteaded over 65, disabled homeowners, and disabled veterans, along with any surviving spouses of disabled veterans or over 65 homeowners. We have multiple methods of payment, including going online to make your payment on our website. You can also call our automated system to make your payments over the phone. You can come into one of our branch offices to make your payment in person, or if you'd prefer the old-fashioned way by mailing in a check along with that coupon, as I mentioned earlier, you're able to do that as well. When you're making your payments, whether it be online, over the phone, or in person, if you're paying with a card, do keep in mind that there is an additional 2.45% fee that we are required to charge by the banking systems in order to take care of that fee. It's not something that we collect here. It's not something that comes to us. It goes straight to the bank for state fees. But it is an option in that you can avoid by going on. If you're paying online, you can go onto our website and pay with something called an e-check. Instead of using your card information, you would input your account and your routing number, similarly to how you would pay through an online payment. And using that e-check form would help you avoid that 2.45% fee. There's no fee for paying with cashier's checks, personal checks, money orders, or by paying in cash, of course. And you can do that at any of our branch offices. We can accept mailed checks, money orders, or cashier's checks. And of course, the phone you would have to make it through either that e-check method or through the your credit card or debit card. We are here to help. This is something that a lot of folks have a lot of great knowledge in. And if you have some form of an issue, or if there's something that you would need assistance with in order to get that taken care of, we're happy to log on and assist you if you'd like to reach out to us. I've also put our contact information into the chat, but our website is here, www.hctax.net. You can also give us a phone call or email us to any of this information down below. But there are a lot of folks here who are very willing and very happy to help you. And hopefully we're able to get any questions answered here in a minute. But for now, I will go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Mabel with the Harris Central Appraisal District. They'll be able to assist you with questions about having your exemptions applied for, getting your protests done, and what their processes are with that. But if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be able to answer a few of those before I leave. But I thank you for your time and your patience, and I hope you all have a really good rest of your day.
Okay. Just before we get to the protest part and the exemptions, I do want to open it up first just for folks to ask questions of Ms. Pinkowski before she leaves. If you do have any specific questions for the actual tax office or about your tax bill, please let us know. She does have a meeting conflict and we'll have to leave a little bit earlier. So I don't want to have your questions not addressed from the tax office, just in case you guys do, because we are going a little bit out of order this time. We are going to get to the questions about the protests and the exemptions and the process. We're going to get into all of that, but I still wanted to give her the opportunity to at least answer any questions about your tax bill or payment options and things of that nature. If any of you guys have any other questions. Ms. Thompson, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? You said you have a question.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My question is, my father, he is a disabled veteran. He is over the age of 65, so he does have those exemptions on his property. However, the property itself does have a affidavit of heirship on it, but he's the only living sibling. Yes, some of his siblings did have children. I'm aware that there's a 30% that goes down to the children, right? Here's my question. His father was Leroy Moore Sr. Then he had
Ma'am,
another son.
we,
Oh,
we,
I'm
we don't
sorry.
want you, we don't want you to
Okay.
give any of that
Okay.
much detail.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
here it is. Well, okay. His father. So it's three of them with the same name, and the senior and the junior are deceased. And so the what's happening is the third is trying to assume the junior suffix at the end of the name. And what he has done is he's come down to you guys and to have the name put back on the tax documents. Here's my question. I have already sent in like the obituary and all those other documents to you guys to have him removed. And you guys, I guess, reached out to him and he has like changed his driver's license to have junior on it, but that's his father is the junior. How can we rectify that? Because the junior
Oh,
is deceased, but it's
okay.
changing the property tax documents. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
So
Miss Thompson,
so
Hmm.
Miss Thompson, that is a
Hmm.
very, very specific question about
Hmm.
your own individual. We're trying to keep questions to be as general as possible. So we're gonna
Hmm.
make sure that you get a contact person or you get in connection with a person
Hmm.
that can address that directly with you. On this
Okay.
format, I don't really want us to get into that much detail about your particular situation because
Okay.
that's personal. You know,
Okay.
that I don't want that personal information kind of getting out there all over the web for
Hmm.
everybody to hear.
So,
So
well,
we,
how can I contact you guys for that? Because it's important because he's changing
I
what y'all
understand.
went over. Hmm.
So Shay, between Shay or Sarah, who does she contact about getting that addressed?
So all of our information comes from the Harris Central Appraisal District. So if your information needs to be changed on the bill, then they need to change it through the appraisal district first. So
Okay.
that appraisal district sends all of their information to us, and that includes, names, addresses, it includes exemptions and what's applicable to that property, along with values. So all of that information needs to be first corrected through the Harris Central Appraisal District, and then they in turn send it to us on something called a correction roll, and we receive that from them electronically. But first, it needs to go through the appraisal district, and they'll have their contact information up here in a minute, along with giving that information here on the presentation next. It's just normally they would go first and I would go second in order to kind of help with these types of questions and who it goes to. But um, like they mentioned before, I have a bit of a constraint with time today. So, but that's something you'll want to reach out to the appraisal district for.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and
Thank you.
and
Oh, go ahead.
also Miss Thompson, that also sounds like you're getting into some airship issues. And I will definitely make sure if you would send me a direct message to me, your email address, I'll send you the presentation about the clearing title and the legal service organizations that are available that are part of our collaboration that could potentially assist you with the clearing title and that airship issue specifically, because that's a whole nother legal realm outside of this scope. So
Yes,
I definitely
ma'am.
want to help you get that addressed as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So there were some questions in the chat that I'm going to go ahead and answer out loud if that's all right, Nia.
Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty, perfect. So I'm just going to work from the bottom up to make sure that I'm not skipping over anything. But for the question was a tax deferral is, or actually, I think Alicia actually answered this one, but I'll go ahead and state it out loud anyway. They were asking for the difference between a tax deferral and a tax freeze. And essentially, a tax deferral is a postponement of payment. A tax ceiling or a tax freeze limits how much you pay on your school or other certain jurisdictions' taxes, meaning that whatever is frozen, the amount that it's frozen at, it will not go above that amount. And whatever difference that is between what it would normally calculate to and what's on the freeze, it doesn't get, it's not required to be paid back upon the person's passing. That's just how much your tax bill calculates that. And so long as that exemption information is correct and it is your exemption that's on that property that results in that tax ceiling or freeze, then you're not going to be required to pay that back. Versus a deferral where once the person passes away, if those taxes remain unpaid, because as I mentioned before, they're still due. Those taxes that are deferred are still due. You just have a postponement of how long you can pay until you pay those off. That deferral upon your passing, if you are not paying your taxes, would still be due upon your passing. The heirs or new owners of the property upon your passing would have to be paying those property taxes that were due afterwards. And they can pay it based off of the 5% interest rate within the first 180 days from that notification of that being removed. But after those 181 days, you would have to pay with the penalty and interest as it would have occurred normally. So the difference being is that the deferral, when you pass away, your property taxes would be owed if you had not paid them, versus the ceiling is a reduction to your taxes. It gets reduced from the amount that is on there. And so long as those exemptions are correct, then that's the amount that you would pay. Let's see here. There was one more. Why tax ceilings are not applicable to all homesteads. So tax ceilings are only applicable to homesteads with either an over 65, a disabled exemption, or disabled veterans exemption. Tax ceilings are not applicable to just homesteads, and that's just a requirement for the tax ceiling itself. It's a benefit to those who are over the age of 65, disabled or disabled veterans, along with their surviving spouses, if that's the case. But in order for that ceiling to be placed into effect, it is required that those exemptions be on there. So that's why it's not applicable to all homesteads. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions in here. Do you see any other ones, Nia, that I might have missed?
Yeah, for a first-time home buyer of a new construction home, okay.
HCAD's gonna get into that one.
Yeah, that's that. I didn't wait till I got to the end of that before I read it. So that one will be addressed as well, Amanda.
There was no, HCAD answered that one as well.
Disability exemption we'll go over as well. Okay. If there are any other questions that actually come up specifically for the tax office that we cannot address, I will definitely make sure to include those questions on an email to Ms. Pinkowski, so that you guys can then have that conversation. But we'll definitely make sure we continue to update the chat with the tax office's information so that you guys can reach out to them directly if we cannot address those questions on their behalf. So, but Shay, I know you're kind of sticking around for just a few more minutes, but
yeah, you've got me for a good couple of minutes left. I'm trying to make sure.
So if anything else comes up, now's your opportunity to put that in the chat for her to address that for you as well. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and move on to the appraisal district's presentation, where they are going to talk about the whole appraisal process and exemptions, valuations, what the protest process is like. Well, now we're going to get into all of those things. So, Miss Mabel, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and the team and move right along?
All right, thank you, Nia. Once again, my name is Mabel Menifee, and I have on the presentation with me Sarah Hatch, who is one of our senior residential property division staff members, along with Alicia Bryant, Linda Lightco, and John Levis. And we're going to talk about, we kind of went a little bit out of order this time. So some of your questions that kind of popped in your head as you were listening to Shay's presentation, we'll be able to kind of put those back into perspective for exemptions and protesting and things like that. So what we want to do is I want to go ahead and introduce Sarah Hatch, who's going to talk about the role of the appraisal district, as well as protesting, why you should protest, and how does that procedure work, and a number of other things. And then we're going to talk, then we're going to go into the exemptions process in more detail, so you can see how exemptions work from filing them and from having them on file at HCAD, and then how they transfer to the taxing jurisdiction so that your tax bills can be calculated, including those. So stick with us and we'll be here till we can answer all of your questions. Right now, I want to turn it over to Sarah.
All right, let me get my screen shared here. Okay. All right, are we all seeing that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So I'm Sarah Hatch. I work in the residential property division at Harris Central Appraisal District. We're going to talk, as Ms. Mabel said, about appraisals and protests and exemptions. So the first thing is just the role of appraisal districts. So the reason that appraisal districts exist is for the purpose of valuing property for property taxes. So Texas has no state income tax, and so the way that we support a lot of our critical local services is via property taxes. It's how we support our schools and our police and fire protection, our road and bridge maintenance, and parks and community centers, all those sort of infrastructure and first responder and our schools, all of those type of things are supported by our property taxes. And all of the rules and the laws that we follow come from the Texas state legislature and the Texas state tax code, and it's all has oversight from the Texas comptroller. So the role of central appraisal districts is our values are to appraise all county property. That's residential property, commercial property, agricultural, industrial, and the personal property that businesses use. Our responsibility is to appraise all of those different types of property at 100% of their market value as of January 1st of every year. So each year we're looking at what is the market value for these types of properties, and we are required by that Texas state legislature to value that at 100% of that market value each year. And so our other roles include administering exemptions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We certify the appraisal rolls. This helps give the right information to the taxing jurisdictions so that then they can set their rates accordingly. Our goal is to keep the system fair. We have one central place that we value all of this property so that it's done consistently. And this is all overseen locally by our chief appraiser and a 9-member administrative board. So we have a few important dates that happen every year in the tax cycle. The first is January 1st. January 1st is the date of appraisal. What that means is your value is based on whatever condition your property was in on January 1st of any given year. So this year, your values should be based on what the condition of your property was on January 1st, to the best of the knowledge that we have. And that's kind of where the protests come in, because maybe there's details about the condition of your home that we aren't privy to. And obviously, we have a lot of properties to keep track of. We aren't going to know what's going on in detail with every single one of them. That's where you come in and you can bring us that information. So May 15th is the protest deadline, or 30 days from the date of notice, whichever comes later. So I believe we sent things out just a few days after April 15th this year for the most part. So most of those protest deadlines are going to be just a few days later, but it's May 15th or 30 days from the date that's on the notice that you received. So protests must be filed by that date in order for any value change to occur before the values are provided to the jurisdictions and the tax bills are calculated. So in order to make any changes, you need to have your protest filed by that deadline. And then in October or November, somewhere around there, the tax bills are mailed out once we've handed over the appraisal rolls and those tax bills have been calculated. And then February 1st of the following year is the delinquency date. So we're valuing as of January 1st of 2025, and you have until through January 31st of 2026 to pay the taxes for this tax year. And then on February 1st, they become delinquent. So as I said, CADs are required by the tax code to be at 100% of market value. There's state oversight on this. Every other year, The state conducts a market value study of all the CADs to make sure that we're compliant with that. So they check our work and make sure that we are staying within a reasonable range, right at about 100% of market value, that we're not too far over or too far under. Our values are conducted by the process of mass appraisal, meaning we're not looking at every single individual home separately. We're valuing groups of property at a time. And that value is derived based on sales. Now, sales disclosure is voluntary in the state of Texas. This is not a mandatory disclosure state. And so we have, you know, with the, again, the best of the information that we're able to get because it's a non-disclosure state. We have the sales information we're able to get, and that's what we use to help us determine the market value of a property. So we're responsible for about 1.9 million parcels of property in Harris County. It's quite a lot to keep track of. And we serve over 500 taxing jurisdictions in Harris County. So there's a lot of different things that kind of go into determining your property value. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of property in Harris County. There are about 7,000 different neighborhoods that we're valuing. We're including consideration of whether your home was recently purchased or sold, and also looking at comparable sales that occurred in your neighborhood. We're looking at the condition of your property. We're looking at any amenities that you have versus what other homes that sold in your area have. So, you know, do you have a pool or not? And other extra, sort of add-ons to the property. And all of those things kind of play a part in determining your market value. But the biggest thing here, and I'm going to highlight this a couple other times later on as well, is you are the expert on your home. No one knows it like you do. I don't know it like you do. We don't always have all the information. You know, you are going to be the person who's best able to give us the information, give us the details on what's going on with the condition of your home as of January 1st. So by now, most of you should have received a value notice. This is an example of what our value notice looks like that we send out. There's a few things on here that I'll highlight. On there, sort of right in the middle of the page is where you see what the 2025 appraised value and market value are. And those numbers may be different or they may be the same. And we'll get into a little bit of that in a minute. Up at the top left is where you'll see a description of the property, the legal lines, and the location of the property. Up on the top right is where you'll find your unique iFile number. That number allows you to sort of access your account on our website and file things electronically. So that's a very important number to make note of and keep track of when you receive your notice. So you can conveniently file a protest online at our website at www.hcad.org/ifile. And this protest is based on the market value of your property. When we're setting a value, the value that we set is the market value. What do we think it will sell for? And so that's what the protest is based on. And then your appraised value takes exemptions into account, and we'll get into a little more detail on that as well, because I know there are a lot of questions about that. So again, the appraised value is the number used in calculating the tax bills. That's the starting point for your taxable value, is that appraised value number. Now, this may be the same as the market value. If you just purchased your home this year, it's going to be the same as your market value. And if you know, if the values have caught up to one another, they may be the same, but it also may be lower because of the 10% appraisal cap for properties with a homestead exemption. If you've had a homestead exemption on your property for multiple years, chances are your appraised value is going to be a bit lower than your market value because it's been limited on how much it can increase each year. It's been limited to a maximum of 10%. There may also be a difference on a property that doesn't have a homestead now that we have the circuit breaker in place that limits it to a 20% increase for each year. Now, the market value, again, that's the value that that we're placing on the property and the value that you would be protesting, because this is the value at which a property would sell for to a willing buyer on the open market. So this is the market value that we're required to value at 100% of for each year. This is our primary role, is establishing what is a fair market value for these properties. So that's what the protests are based on. And then the appraised value is again based on the exemptions that are in place and the cap on increases that's happened in previous years. And that's where the taxes are calculated from. So when you protest, if you have a big gap in those two numbers, in order to change the appraised value, which is the starting point for your taxable value, we would need to adjust the market value below that appraised value in order to see a difference in the appraised value. So the second page of the value notice contains some other helpful information as well. A few of the things that it includes are the land and improvement value. So it gives a breakdown. You know, on the first page, it's just the total value of your property. On the second page, you'll see how much of that value we've placed on the land and how much is on everything else. When we say improvement value, we don't mean that we're assuming you've improved your home. What improvement means is anything that has improved upon the land. So any buildings that are there, your house, a detached garage, a barn, a pool, all of those things are improvement value because they're something that is on the land. So a lot of people get tripped up by that, thinking that that means we think you've remodeled your home, but it just means everything other than the land. Another thing that's on that second page is the previous year's appraised value. So you'll be able to see what your appraised value was the previous year as well as this year, and then you can check to make sure that your 10% homestead cap is doing its job, things like that. You'll also be able to see your specific taxing jurisdictions listed out there, and whatever current exemptions you have applied to your property. So a few questions to consider when protesting. The first one is that market value. That's what it's all about. Is your value consistent with recent property sales in your area? That's how we're determining your value. And if you know what homes have been selling for in your area and you know that your value is right in line with what has sold, then that's an important thing to consider. And if you know that the sales in your area are not the same as the value that you've got in place, then definitely file a protest. Another thing to consider is equity. Are similar homes in a similar neighborhood or in your neighborhood valued more or less the same? If you have other homes that are roughly the same as yours in your neighborhood, a lot of neighborhoods have the same floor plan a few different times. And if you know that the value of those is pretty much in line with the value of your home, then they're valued equitably. Maybe your property has some issues such as deferred maintenance or hidden defects that are affecting your home's value that we may not know about. Those are important things to consider and to bring to our attention as well. So some evidence to collect for your protest would include that comparable sales info. If you know of some sales, again, Texas is a non-disclosure state. We may not have information on every sale that occurred in your neighborhood. If you know of some sales that happened in your neighborhood that you think we might not have, that you think support your protest, then bring us that info. Now, an important thing to note for that is we're trying to value as of January 1st of 2025. So by the time you come in to do your protest in June or July, bringing us sales from, May, June, July of this year is beyond what we're looking at when we consider comparable sales to value as of January 1st. It's best to be as close to that date as possible, but when we have set your value, the sales that we're looking at are the sales that occurred during the calendar year of 2024 and January of 2025. Some other evidence to gather for your protest include, as I said, those hidden defects, any condition issues that you're aware of in your home. It's good to give us repair estimates for those things. It helps us get an idea of the extent of the damage and help kind of put a number on those things, as well as photos of any of those defects or damage. And if you're wanting to show us that your home is not as updated as the comparable sales in your area, then again, bringing us photos of what your home looks like compared to those comparable sales is helpful. So what happens after you file a protest? You will get a notification of your hearing date unless you choose the iSettle program, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you should get a notification of when your hearing date is set for. And you should expect to receive that notification, as well as a way to access HCAD's evidence packet at least 2 weeks prior to when your hearing is scheduled. Now, that evidence packet contains a lot of information, a lot of really helpful information. One of the main pieces of information it contains is the sales in your immediate neighborhood. So it's got information about what your property's characteristics are, and then it's got a list of all the sales that we're aware of that happened in your immediate neighborhood for that year. Again, for the calendar year of 2024 and January of 2025. It actually has sales going back a couple years beyond that as well. It also includes sales in surrounding neighborhoods and interactive maps that help put those nearby sales into perspective of where they're located compared to your home, and some additional points of important property data. Now, because of state confidentiality laws about the information contained in our evidence pack, this information is only available once you file a protest. We're only allowed to give this information in the context of your hearing and your protest. So if you want access to all of this information in the evidence packet for your property, you will need to file a protest. And then you can always choose, once you've reviewed that information, if you look at it and it all makes sense and you don't think it's worth your time to come in for your protest, you can always withdraw. But if you want to see that information, you will have to file a protest. So some different methods and types of protests. There are different ways you can file your protest. One is just the standard paper form. You can mail that in, or you can submit it electronically. We have really convenient ways to file your protest online via our iFile system. Again, that's where you'll use that number that's on your notice up on the top right. Your iFile number will grant you access to a portal where you can file electronically. You also have the option online to opt into our iSettle program, which the iSettle program allows you to sort of take the place of an informal hearing with one of our staff. It will allow somebody to review your information, and if they're able to offer you a settlement value via email, then they will do that, and you may be able to settle without having to come in and have an informal hearing. If you do an informal hearing, that can be done either virtually or in person, and that's one-on-one with a member of our HCAD personnel. And after that, if you're not able to settle your property value during an informal hearing, then you have the formal hearing with the appraisal review board. Again, that can be done either virtually or in person. And now, as of a couple of years ago, that can be done either with a 3-member panel of appraisal review board members or a 1-person panel. And then beyond that, there are additional methods and recourse available to you, including arbitration. So a little bit more information about the formal hearings, or those appraisal review board hearings. The time is limited for those. As I said, we've got 1.9 million properties in Harris County, and about over 500,000 of those typically protest. So we have a lot of protests to do in any given year. And so we try to be mindful of everybody's time, and we try to keep those hearings to about 15 minutes. So be prepared for your hearing. And that 15 minutes includes not only your presentation of your opinion of your value, but also HCAD's presentation of our evidence and the review board's deliberations. So be prepared to be succinct, show us the very best of your evidence, have it arranged in the order that you want to make your points. and bring copies of it so that everybody in the room can be reviewing it at the same time. Have a copy for yourself to refer to, have a copy for the appraiser, and then have a copy for every panel member that is going to be there if you're meeting in person. So if it's a 1-member panel, have 3 copies. If it's a 3-member panel, have 5 copies. Just make sure everybody can be following along. And I'm trying to think of some of the questions that came up and whether there's any more. There's one other thing I want to address because I did have questions about disaster damage from hurricanes and things of that nature. We did have Hurricane Beryl last year. And if your property was still damaged from Hurricane Beryl as of January 1st of 2025, or from any other disaster that occurred before January 1st, if you have damage that was still in place as of January 1st, that's definitely relevant for your protest. Do bring us information about that and let us know what the condition of your property was as of January 1st. I had a question about the temporary disaster exemptions. Those are, there is a deadline to file for a temporary disaster exemption of up to 105 days after the day that the governor declares a disaster. So the time to file for that after an event like Hurricane Beryl has passed, unfortunately. But if you've still got damage from that or any other disaster that has occurred previously, do bring us that information. Now, if something occurs after January 1st of 2025, then we're not able to consider that during your protest, but do keep that temporary disaster exemption in mind. And with that, it looks like we are at exemptions. Miss Mabel, I'm happy to keep going, or you can take over, up to you.
Why don't you keep going? That way we won't interrupt. And the thought processes and juices can keep flowing.
Okay.
Appreciate it. And I'll just say next slide.
No problem.
Thanks, Sarah. So exemptions, you've heard a little bit about what the result of those can be from the tax office in terms of calculating your bills and how those play into what your ultimate bill will be. So let's start from scratch. Where do you get those exemptions and how they actually save you money as you apply for them? And just basically, what are they? So we talked about them a little bit. They are, of course, HCAD administers those. That's our second biggest task. And I do want to say that exemptions take up a pretty big chunk of the Texas property tax code. So it's important that we have our exemption specialists be able to assist you. These are the folks that work in it every day. They know some of the different details. So for some of us, if we're a little timid about answering those exemption questions, it's because it could be one, it depends on the specific situation. So that is another reason we kind of say, well, we can't answer specific general questions. Feel free to reach out to HCAD and we can help you with those specific ones. So again, they are administered, we administer them, and basically they exempt a portion of your property's value from taxation. And as it relates to residential exemptions, these are going to be for your primary resident only. You must own and occupy the property for which you are applying for the exemption. These again are used by the taxing authorities in calculating your bills. And to talk a little bit more about what those common exemptions are, we'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about basically the general resident homestead exemption. These are the most common ones. If you live in and own your home, you certainly probably have one or more of these. The general resident homestead, the over 65 exemption. Important to remember, these are two separate exemptions. You will get the general resident homestead exemption is the main one that you will have, and then as you are eligible for the others, they can also be added. That includes the over 55 surviving spouse, the disability exemption. Then there are a number of disabled veterans exemptions that veterans can apply for. and sometimes they're survivors. And then there are some other service-related exemptions that relate to first responders and the like. So let's see, and then we'll go into specifics on the general resident homestead exemption. Next slide, please. So the general resident homestead is the one that if you own and occupy your home, you should already have this, or you certainly should be applying for it today. You have to own and occupy the home as your primary residence. Important to remember that you can only have one of these for a property. And what is required simply is filling out the application. You must own the property, so we do need you to provide us with proof of ownership. And the other piece that's important to have is we will need a copy of your driver's license. If there's another owner, if there's another person on the deed, we will need a copy of their driver's license as well. And that driver's license does need to match the address on the property. So by having the general resident homestead exemption, you also will you're eligible for something called a 10% appraisal increase cap. Now, a lot of times when I say this, people tend to think, oh, so that means that you can't raise my property value more than 10% each year. Or some people may tend to interpret it as, oh, that keeps you from, you're going to raise it, but can't go over 10%. So what that means is that in times, as it was initially put into the law, in times of rapidly increasing property values in Harris County and other counties throughout Texas, we see that this 10% cap protects homeowners from those rapid increases. Like for the last 4 or 5 years, some property values have gone up as much as 20, 25, or 30% in a year. It's something that's been happening throughout Texas for the last 5 years. So that 10% has protected a lot of homeowners from those rapid increases by having their general resident homestead exemption in place. Now, it doesn't mean that there have been years when values, as we saw back in the day, values may not go up more than 2 or 3, 4%, and in some cases that happens to be the case. So then you always have that. But again, that 10% cap helps protect you from any rapid increases or surprising increases as over each year. The other important thing to have for under the general resident homestead exemption is that 100% $100,000 school tax exemption. And that's by state law. So every single school district in the state has to offer this exemption. Basically, it means if you have a $300,000 home, you are only going to be taxed, your school taxes are only going to be based on $200,000. So that exemption takes away that first $100,000 and you are only taxed on $200,000. There are other exemptions that may be offered by various jurisdictions, as in Harris County offers some specific ones. The city of Houston may offer some, certain special districts. It kind of depends on where you live. And again, you can always refer to the back of your value notice to see which jurisdictions you're in and what your exemptions might be. Next slide, please. It will be the immediate resident homestead exemption. So this is a fairly new one. It was instituted in 2022. And basically, for those of you who may have just bought your home this year, it used to be that you would have to wait until the following January the 1st to apply for your exemptions. And then that would be the full year before your appraisal cap set. Because of the immediate resident homestead exemption, you can now apply for the exemption as soon as you move in and occupy that home. So if you were to move in say March, then you would be then your tax bill for that year would be prorated on those on 9 months as opposed to the full 12 months. So you would get the benefit of that homestead exemption for that first 9 months from the date that you move in. However, if the previous owner, and because this is most of the properties that benefit from this are typically going to be new builds or homes that previously did not have any exemptions on it. Perhaps it was a rental. If the previous owner did have those exemptions, had exemptions on the home and decided they, then you would receive those exemptions for the year. In some cases, you might even luck out and you 30-year-old purchasing a house and you bought it from someone, from a couple who was over 65 and had those exemptions on their property for 10 or 15 years or more, in which case that's a pretty good deal for that first year. Do be aware that the following year you're going to your exemptions are going to reset to your market value. So then you would start receiving the savings based on that. But for that first year, that's what an immediate resident homestead exemption could be. If the homeowner, as I said, if the homeowner was previously owned and receiving exemptions, those are the ones that will remain for the applicable tax year. Unless there could be certain situations where the owner might decide to take those, but for the most part, that immediate resident homestead exemption does give you some relief for that first year that you move into the home. And let's see, we'll go to our next set of slides, which is the over 65 and disability exemption. So it's important for folks to understand that the over 65 and disability are on top of that general resident homestead exemption. So once you qualify for that, you would have that in place and say you turn over 65, or then once you turn over 65, you would qualified for that those additional exemptions. And you can receive those for the full year. We do ask that you wait till within 3 months or so of turning 65 to apply for those, just so that we can make sure they're current. But you will receive them for that full year once it's been processed. And it's important also to note that the disability exemption, which provides pretty much the same benefits as the over 65 exemption, is for someone you do not have to turn 65 for this one. You are eligible for it if you qualify under the disability exemption process. And that basically can mean that you receive disability benefits under the Federal Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Act. You're getting Social Security as a fully disabled person, or in some cases, some people may not be receiving Social Security, but they are disabled, in which case we can also accept a physician statement. Your physician would need to fill that out. We have that form available on our website for the physician to fill out. And you can send that in, or the physician would need to send that in order for you to qualify for that. So what are some of the additional benefits of the over 65 or disability exemption? The first one is something called, you're going to have something called a school tax ceiling or freeze. You might also hear the word limitation. I don't know why there's so many words, but it's the school tax ceiling or freeze. And what that means, what does that mean? It means that the year that you turn 65, whatever you paid in school taxes for that year, it is going to freeze at that amount. It will never go over that amount. It can go lower if your property value falls lower, but it freezes at that amount unless you do something where you would add value to the home, such as adding additional square footage. You build a new room, or you add a tennis court or something of that nature, which then increases the value, which then would require that ceiling be reset before it's frozen again. Because you have increased in the value. But again, if you have done nothing, that's the school tax, that ceiling, that freeze will remain on your property for as long as you're eligible. Exemptions grant, and of course you do, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to receive all the exemptions you already had with the general resident homestead exemption. And another important benefit that you are also eligible for is something called a tax deferral. You can, a deferral is a postponement of taxes. It's not something where those taxes aren't due, but they will simply be postponed or deferred for as long as you live in the house, if you would like that. It does not mean that you still can't pay your taxes. A lot of people may have that in store for, use that as something of an insurance policy. When you turn over 65, you never know if you're going to be in the hospital. You could be in the hospital or away on vacation and just simply forgot to pay those taxes on by January 31st, in which case you would be hit with a 7% penalty right away. The exemptions, by having that tax deferral, you would only be hit with a zero. You would be hit with a very small penalty, and I think Shay talked about this a little bit earlier, but it protects you from those steep penalties. It also protects you from any foreclosure action or any attorney's fees that might result from additional action because taxes were delinquent. Other exemptions are also, if you've got an over 65, it depends again on where you live, but some other exemptions, other jurisdictions may also offer additional may also offer additional exemptions to folks who have the over 65 and disability exemption. A great example of that is Harris County, which offers something in the neighborhood of I can't remember exactly, but it's an over $300,000 exemption on your property if you're over 65. And essentially that means that if your home is less than that amount, let's just say it's 320,000. If your home is worth less than that, then essentially you would not pay county taxes because you were exempted out. As I said, that's an example of some additional exemptions that you might receive with the over 65, just depending on where you live in the county. And let's see, the next most common exemption on the next slide is going to show the over 55 surviving spouse exemption. That one is pretty simple, but to explain that one is that it's the over 55 if your deceased spouse, and the two people, if the deceased spouse, because they were over 65 and the home had been receiving those exemptions, if that deceased spouse passed away, the surviving spouse could maintain all of those exemptions. They would not lose them. They would not have to be reset. They could maintain them as they are, as long as they were 55 years of age or older on the date of the spouse's death. They would continue to receive all of those exemptions. It doesn't mean that you could apply for them once you're over 55. It means that your spouse would have had to have had them when they passed away. It continues with the school tax ceiling, and of course you're still eligible for the tax deferral, and you can pay your taxes in installments without accruing penalties. And that is with the tax assessor collector's office. Next slide, we're going to talk about the heirship exemption, a very important one particularly for people who may be living in more mature neighborhoods, or, depending on your personal situation. But the heirship exemption is one where, you are living in a property that your parents left to you as well as your 3 siblings. Perhaps your 3 siblings are out, they've bought their own homes, they're receiving their general resident homestead exemption wherever they live. You are the person living in that home. You're paying all of the bills, taking care of the maintenance. There was a time when you could not get more than 25% of whatever that exemption was because you were only a quarter owned. You only had a 25% interest in the property. However, on our application, on our exemption application in Section 3 of the homestead application, there is a place where you can identify if it is an heir property. And you'll see that highlighted here in yellow. If you mark yes, and you mark if the second question, and do other heirs also occupy the property, then that sets you up for the ability to qualify for the heirship exemption, which will give you 100%, which will give you a 100% exemption, and it does not affect the ownership rights of the other of the other heirs or owners of the property who share ownership in the property. It just simply allows you to take advantage of getting that full exemption. And there's a series of questions that would have to be answered that you can see here. Other heirs on the property you need to provide an affidavit establishing your ownership interest, provide the death certificate of the previous property owner, a copy of the most recent utility bill. A lot of people ask, why do you need that? It's just we need that proof to show that the home is actually being occupied. And then a citation of any court records that you can provide. I know this is a lot to kind of process in terms of how do you get this application. I will say, please, that if you find yourself in this situation, you have any questions, please reach out to our exemptions department, and they will be more than happy to walk you through this process in order to help you get that exemption. So we can go to the next slide. I'm going to go how to apply for those exemptions. We have a number of ways. You can mail the paper form in. You can go online. We have those forms are, for the most part, fillable on our website. We also have a mobile app, or you can copy and scan the applications in and send them to us by email. Depending on when you send them in, we typically try to make sure everything is processed and approved and on your account within 90 days. However, that depends on us getting all of the information that we need at one time, so that your application process isn't delayed. So it's important to try to submit everything at once. People oftentimes forget that they need to submit the driver's license of both people. If there are two people on the deed, we need the driver's license of both. And then once we get all of that information, and we apply it to your account, we're going to let you know that your exemption has been processed and approved. If you're listening right now, you're not really sure if you filed your exemption, or maybe you can't remember, you forgot whether or not you actually filed your general resident and you're over 65, you can always go out on our website at www.hcad.org. And it's a public website. So when you go out there and look up your property by typing in your address, your name, or your account number, it's going to show in the exemptions column on the left-hand side what your exemptions are. And typically it's going to say, if you've got your general resident homestead exemption, it will say residential homestead. If you also have additional exemptions, such as the over 65 disability, it's not going to say that exactly. It's going to say residential homestead, and then it will say multiple. The reason we do that is because it's a public website, and we really we cannot provide that sort of personal information on a public website. So we don't want the public knowing that there is a disabled person or a senior living in that home, and so it helps to protect your privacy. The annual exemption, we also, before I get to that, we also have a how-to video for anyone still not sure, a little hesitant to fill that application out. We have a how-to video on our website, which also shows you, which can walk you through filling out that application step by step. The annual exemption confirmation card that you're also looking at on this page, on this slide, is something that I don't know how many of you remember receiving it, but it usually comes in the mail in December or early January. What is that? The card is going to say, it's just a little postcard on white paper that's going to tell you what your exemptions are that HCAD currently has on the property. It's going to show whether you've got your homestead, you're over 65, and it's an opportunity for you to review those. And perhaps if something has changed, you're obligated to notify HCAD that something has changed, so that we can correct that account and make sure you aren't receiving exemptions that you're not eligible for. You can also, if you don't recall, so once you see it, if it works, fine, you can throw it in a drawer somewhere if everything is correct. If you don't remember receiving it around that time, please know that this is our way of auditing whether or not the folks that are receiving exemptions, homeowners receiving those exemptions are eligible for them. So if it comes back to HCAD, because these are not forwarded by the post office, if they're not allowed to be forwarded. So if it comes back to HCAD, then we are gonna launch an investigation to see, oh, this may be that this homeowner is no longer living there. And so therefore, whoever is in the home now are not eligible for those particular exemptions because they have to apply for them. The exemptions, is important to remember, belong to the person and not the property. So we would eventually, if we're unable to contact someone, once this exemption card has been returned, those exemptions may likely roll off and you would need to reapply. So please keep that in mind. And then finally, I've got one more, I think I've got one more slide I need to show you. Oh, I think this was referred to earlier too. This was something that was passed in November of last year, and it's on a three-year pilot project, so we're not sure how long it's going to be around, but it's something that we are that is being provided to individuals, to property owners right now. It's called a circuit breaker, and basically this is something that applies to properties that are not homesteaded, and as if they are at or below $5 million. Generally, these are going to be apartments or rental properties. The appraised value for that current year on those properties can't go over 20% of the appraised value for the previous year. So it's kind of like a homestead in that regard. Homesteaded properties get that 10% cap. These are going to be subject to a 20% cap. And again, it excludes the homesteaded properties as well as agricultural properties, which have their own set of exemptions. You, however, must have owned the property by January 1st of 2025 in order to be eligible. This is going to be called a circuit breaker, and this one is automatically applied to those properties. So again, if you have investment properties, this is something you want to be aware of. And if we can go over to the next slide, this is what our website looks like, www.hcat.org. And if you look up into that second lighter blue line, I mentioned a property search under here, and that's going to show, that's where you would go to check on your property status, your exemption status. You can see what your values are for that year, and you can flip on the back and see what they were for last year, and as well as what your land versus improvement values were. Also on that, we have on here are the forms. I mentioned all of, just about every form that you would need is on our website, and the majority of them are fillable online. So for instance, with the exemption application, you can fill it out, scan your driver's license and upload that and send that in to apply for the exemptions, as well as some of the other things that are other forms that are available that you can submit electronically. You can also mail them in, of course. So if we go to the next slide, that's our landing page for the HCAD website. And then in our next slide, this is our contact information. We are located out on the Northwest Freeway at the Hollister-Tidwell exit. However, we have a lot of services that you don't have to drive all the way out here for. So please, if you want to visit our website first, I'd recommend that and see which things you can be transpired that way electronically. You can also email us. You also can email us through your personal account or online at the address you see below, and our general telephone number is 713-957-7800. Now, I will warn you, as we get closer to the protest deadline, it's going to be harder and harder to reach us over the phone, as we do have I believe it's 1.3 million residential property owners in Harris County, and many of them often have questions within that 4 or 5 day period around the protest deadline. So if you can, go ahead and file your protest now. In the event you have any questions, we can help you more quickly, but of course, we will always get back to you at some point. I think this is going to be the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I hope we've cleared up a number of your questions. And if not, we'll be around for a few more minutes to answer as many of those as we can. And I will turn it back over to Nia to go over the questions. Thanks again.
All right. Okay. So off top, Sarah, from looking at some of the questions that are in the chat, there are some of the questions that are in the chat that I want to have addressed because I know that they kind of pertain to the broader audience. There's some of them that I won't ask again because I know that you guys have already answered them directly. But it seems as though the majority of the questions are related to appraisal versus market. When you protest, which value goes down, which one does not get adjusted. Can you explain that one more time?
I will do my best.
Okay.
Okay, so the value that HCAD sets is the market value. And your appraised value is the starting point for your taxable value, and it takes exemptions into account. So let me see if I can kind of back up and explain that a little bit better. So if you I'm going to use real easy numbers to calculate. So say you bought your property 3 years ago at $100,000. Let's make it real simple. $100,000. And then the next year, properties just like yours in your neighborhood are selling for 125,000 instead of 100. If you have a homestead exemption on your property, then after that first year that you've owned it for the full year, you're limited to 10% increase on your appraised value. Now, the market value of your home that next year, because everything else like your home is selling at 125,000, your market value is 125,000 because we are obligated by the tax code to value at 100% of what your home would sell for on the open market this year. So your market value is 125. However, from the 100 that you bought it at and were valued at the previous year, if you have a homestead, you're limited to 10% increase. So from 100, your appraised value can go up to 110, where your market value may be 125. If you don't have a homestead, now the circuit breaker limits you 20%. So instead of going up from 100 to 110, you could go up from 100 to 120, but it'll still be a little bit of a gap from that 125. That's how those cap increases work. So if, like Mabel said, in years of rapid increase, which we haven't had the last couple of years, but we had a lot of that like right after COVID, like in 2021 and 2022, we were seeing some pretty rapid increase in market prices. And so those were some of those years where values in any given neighborhood may have been going up 25 to 30%, sometimes more in 1 year's time. And so definitely when that's happening, then that 10% limit or 20% limit on increase from each year to the next is sort of helped limit your taxable value increase. So your market value is still what your home would sell for. But you may have a gap where your appraised value is lower because you've had your exemptions on there for multiple years. And maybe, if you started your exemptions many, many years ago, you may have quite a big gap now where values have gone, up quite a bit, and you've been limited to those little 10%, not little, but you've been limited to that 10% increase each year. And so your appraised value may not be anywhere near caught up with what the market value has been doing. That's where the appraised value comes in. And then from there, that appraised value is the starting point for when, then that's the start for your taxable value. And then the sort of lump sum exemptions that the different taxing jurisdictions take off, they take off from that appraised value to get down to the value you're actually getting taxed on. So in the protest process, we are dealing with the market value, meaning if you have, say you're in that situation where your market is 125 and your appraised is 120. there's a little bit of a gap there, but it's not a huge gap. If you bring in information to your protest and we determine that the fair market value for your home instead of 125 is 115, then that will reduce both your market and appraised down to 115, because your appraised value is going to reduce to match the market value if the market value goes below. Now, if you were in that situation where you were at the 110 appraised value and we put your market value at 115, your appraised value is going to stay at 110 because the market value didn't go below where that 110,000 is. Trying to think what else I need to say about that. That's kind of the rough version of that, but I hope that sheds a little bit more light. You know, those appraised values are just calculated based on when your exemption went into effect and what the limit on its appraised value increase each year is. But the market value is whatever the homes are selling for in your neighborhood.
Okay. How does that impact new construction homes? Especially those that were not completed. Example, someone had asked about a house that wasn't purchased until after the house wasn't completed until after January 2025.
Sure. So if that's the case, we're not going to have any, I mean, you're not going to be able to have a homestead cap on that. If the home wasn't complete, then you weren't occupying it, right? Now you can have the immediate homestead exemption applied once you start occupying the home, but that's not going to, we don't start seeing a cap on increase until after you've occupied the home for a full calendar year. Or until you've occupied the home starting on January 1st of a given year. So for a new construction home, I know we definitely had some questions about that. So let's say, for example, there is a new construction home that as of January 1st of this year was about, let's say we have it at about 80% complete. It was almost done, but not quite. And it got done, you know, let's say in March, and you bought it in April and now you are living in it. As of January 1st, we have that valued at about 80% of completion. So it should be valued less than what you bought it for. And you should still then be able to protest that property if you've received your notice. If you haven't received your notice, you can look online and try to find it there. I think I saw somebody mentioning that they may have stuff that still all says pending. If it still all says pending, then chances are we have not completed it and finished valuing it and sent out that notice yet. But when that notice goes out, if you've gotten that notice, you can protest that property because you're now the owner of it, and bring in whatever information you feel is helpful. But chances are, I guess the helpful information there would be if we have it valued at 80% complete as of January 1st, and you know for a fact it was not 80% complete, it was less than that, then that's something you could bring to our attention. Yeah, as far as exemptions, those shouldn't really be playing much of a role in the case of a home that was incomplete on January 1st.
Something I want to add as a realtor, or when you go to close on your house, you need to look at your closing statement and also see how they valued or how they prorated your tax value when you closed. And if you got your financing based on unimproved property taxes versus improved, meaning sometimes these builders do some little creative financing to get you approved to purchase a house without the actual full value of the house included in what your mortgage payment is current or will be. So the following year, when you get a new tax bill, then you may be getting a notice that your mortgage payment is going up because there was a drastic increase in your property taxes because the full value of the house was not actually on your closing documents when you actually close on the house, if that makes any sense. So do keep in mind or pay attention to that when you're actually purchasing new construction as well. Miss Mabel, I see you went off mute. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, I was just clicking as I was nodding my head.
Okay,
Because a lot of, because that does happen a lot. It's
a
important.
lot.
Yes.
It happens a lot, so please be careful. There was a question that popped up that please explain transferring tax ceiling when a person moves within Harris County and changes school districts.
I think Linda, are you still on here? I'm gonna let her take that one over.
And John did answer it
Oh,
too
John.
there.
I was going to say, John answered it.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Oh, can someone explain those so everybody else knows what that means though? In case they're not looking at the chat.
John, would you like to, since you put it in there?
Where is John?
Oh, bear with me here. I just had to find my audio button. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Basically, the way the school tax ceiling works whenever you transfer from one school district to another is it transfers the percentage of your freeze, not the actual dollar amount. So the example that I offered to the gentleman who asked the question, for example, is let's say your current school taxes are $1,000, but your ceiling was set at $500. You would actually transfer a 50% tax ceiling because $500 is half of 1,000. So if in your new school district, your tax liability is $2,000, you'd be responsible for $1,000 because you're transferring the 50%, not the 500. Forgive me for using numbers because I know that gets complicated. But does that make sense?
I hope it addresses the question for the person that had
Well,
it.
I'm just I forgive me. I'm looking at you while I'm saying this. Nia.
Oh, and
Well,
and I'm
just-
reading I'm paying attention to the chat, trying to see if they respond.
I get you.
That.
Thank you, Tanya.
In the tax office may be able to better explain, but I know they had to leave for a meeting, so you may want to contact them because they do the figures then.
Okay. Another question here. Why does Pasadena have two school districts in property taxes? And what if your kids attend neither HISD or Pasadena ISD?
So I'm not aware of what the specific is there with two school districts. I don't that's not a typical situation. I know sometimes we do have properties that sort of sit on a line between two different jurisdictions, and so we may have, they may be 40% responsible in one jurisdiction and 60% in the other. But that's a situation I'm not presently familiar with Pasadena having two school districts. Now, as far as whether or not your kids attend, is we all pay school district taxes regardless whether or not we have children, whether they're in those public schools, whether they're in private schools, whether we're homeschooling them, or whatever the case may be. Now, if you're zoned to that school district, you're paying school district taxes there if you own a property in that school district.
Correct.
Can HCAD use homes outside of my neighborhood to value my market value? And when I have protested homes that are not in the neighborhood that are used.
Okay,
Do they ever?
So what we typically try to do, we usually try to prioritize the neighborhood your home is in. Now some neighborhoods are really large and have a lot of data and a lot of sales and a lot of information we can use. And some neighborhoods are really, really tiny, like 12 townhomes that are different from everything around them. And so it's just those 12 townhomes. And in any given year, what's the likelihood one of those 12 properties is going to sell? And so we may not have very much data in some of those neighborhoods. So in a large neighborhood where we typically have plenty of data, that's where we're going to be looking. We're going to really be focused on what happened in your neighborhood, because your neighborhood is going to be impacted by different things than other neighborhoods around you. You'll have a different HOA, you may have different neighborhood amenities like a public pool or tennis courts or things like that. You may, your neighborhood may be uniquely impacted by something that the neighborhood across the highway isn't. And so we're trying to find what is most comparable to your property, and a big part of that is location, right? That's the real estate thing, right? Location, location, location. So we're gonna be trying to look at what's in your neighborhood as the most indicative of your property and what it could sell for. However, of course, context is everything. If we don't have much information on your neighborhood, because maybe it's one of those really small neighborhoods where we don't have a lot to go on typically, then we may be looking at other similar comparable neighborhoods nearby as well. And we typically try to kind of group those neighborhoods together by again, similar types of properties, similar impacts. And we may use sales that are nearby from those other neighborhoods that are similar. And take those into consideration, because we do want to make sure that we're being equitable as well. If we've got that little neighborhood of 12 and we don't really have sales in there, we still need to be equitable with valuing the homes in that neighborhood compared to the neighborhoods around them. If the neighborhoods around them are all pretty consistently increasing by, say, 7% this year, or whatever the case may be, then it stands to reason that that little neighborhood is as well. They're not going to be the one lone little chunk in there that is doing something different, most likely. And so we'll try to keep it equitable with what's around it and take the surroundings into consideration as well. Now, what we typically will not do is look for something that's real far away. Harris County is very large. We're not going to compare something from a different school district within Harris County to your home, because that makes a huge difference. People pick a home to buy based on a school district that it's in a lot of times. And so we're not going to compare things that are in very different areas. We're also, if there are plenty of sales in your immediate neighborhood and they're reasonably comparable to your property, then we have no reason to be looking for sales from other neighborhoods nearby. We have plenty to go on within the immediate neighborhood. I think hopefully that answers that question.
Okay. How can we ensure we have the circuit breaker exemption?
That should be automatic. That happens systematically for any property that doesn't have a homestead exemption on it, correct?
That's
Lady?
correct.
Yeah.
Under $5 million.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, any property valued under $5 million, yes.
So they would simply need to compare their last year's notice with this year's.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's where it's handy having that last year's appraised value on the second page, right? I know I also saw a question from somebody about how to access the HCAD's evidence. I think it's on the notice of your hearing date and time. On the second page of that, or maybe on the first page, there are detailed instructions of how to go onto our website and go through the portal and access our HCAD evidence. So if you have your notice of when your hearing is scheduled, there should be information on there about how to access that evidence.
I think in that case, Sarah, that person has an agent.
Okay.
So the agent does have access to the information, but I'm not sure if the property owner will have that access since they're not actually protesting.
Okay. Yeah. In that case, then I guess contact our office and we may be able to help you with that.
And at what time since you just Alicia, since you brought up an agent, at what point does a homeowner use an agent to protest their property taxes?
Well, I don't like to take business from anyone, but for property owners, your property better than anyone else. And if sometimes property owners use agents because they don't have the time to come in and protest, and most of the time that's the reason why. Not that they can get the value lowered any lower than them protesting themselves, but Sometimes property owners don't have the time, but they also have to pay for those services. Whereas if you protested your own property, of course, it's free for you.
And even if your market value and your appraised value are the same, should somebody still protest?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're however your appraised value compares to your market value, you can file a protest. If if you are one of those who's had a homestead exemption for many, many years and you have a very large gap between your market value and your appraised value, again, we have to, in order to see a difference to your appraised value, the market value has to get below it. If you have, I mean, I've seen cases where there's like $100,000 of difference between the market and appraised value. If you have a gap that large, then, take that into consideration of the, are we going to be able to get the market value below the appraised value in that case? And is that something that, is worth it to you to spend your time to come in and protest in that case?
Okay. There was a question here on the YouTube. Please explain special provisions for first responders. Also, when assessing property values, are fences and flooring taken into account? For example, damaged carpet.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of, I know we had other questions about sort of the defects that were mentioned as well. We're mainly considering things that are within the actual structure of your home. So first, I heard the word fences. Let me address that. Fences, driveways, if we don't put a value on it to begin with, we don't value your fence, we don't value your driveway, we don't have any value attached to those items. And so whatever the condition of those items is, we're not going to be reducing your value based on something that we don't have any value on to begin with. But for things that are part of the structure of your home or like that, so your flooring, if you've got something major going on with your flooring, that's certainly something you can bring to our attention. The walls, the windows, the doors, all of those kind of things, the cabinets, anything that's part of the structure of your home is relevant. Or, if we have on file that you have 3 extra storage buildings on your property and you only have 1 or something like that, that's something you can bring to our attention as well. So anything that we have initially placed a value on is something you can protest the value of. But yeah, things like fences and driveways, we don't have any value on to begin with.
At the beginning of that question, Nia, you mentioned something about first responders.
Yes, special provisions for first responders. Explain that.
The provision, which I'm not sure what exactly the property owner is asking, but what was mentioned during the exemption section or that would be mentioned during the exemptions, there are exemptions for surviving spouses of first responders. But that's the only, I don't know if there are any provisions on what exactly the property owner is asking, but there is an exemption for a surviving spouse of a first responder.
Okay, can you explain what that again?
Whatever that there isn't a 100% exemption, 100% total exemption for a surviving spouse of a first responder. So that would mean that the first responder
Killed in the line
has passed away.
Okay, so there is no exemption prior to the passing.
No,
they just have to apply for it if in the event they are married to a first responder, not a relative or anything like that. Even though they may be living in the same house, they have to be the spouse of
the first responder.
Okay.
And killed in the line of duty.
Okay, got it. I wanted to make sure that married to or the spouse of, because Mabel and I have had the conversation before, and I brought up the question about the different exemptions when it's the spouses that own the home versus a parent and a child, and how those exemptions don't, a 100% exemption does not apply for a 65 and older parent versus, can you guys explain that?
Okay,
when they're both on the deed, right?
When they're both on the deed, you got a parent, both on a parent and a child. The parent is over 65, and then they apply for the exemption. How's the exemption applied for the parent versus the child?
Well, it depends. Are they both living in the property? Is that your
Yes.
question as well? Okay, so
Yes.
then they're each entitled to their percentage of the residential homestead, their percentage of a disability exemption if they apply, or an over 65 or a veteran. For whatever their percentage of ownership is, that's what they are entitled to for their exemption. Does that help explain?
I know the answer to that, yes. However, my thing was that if you are a married couple, in all actuality, according to the law, the spouse owns 50%, the other spouse owns 50%, but they get 100% exemption because they are a married couple. In the
So
instance there is a parent and a child, a parent may own 50%, the child owns 50%, but only 50% of the exemption gets applied because of the parents over 65, not 100%.
correct.
Yeah.
Because
See?
if a parent and a child own the property together, the child is not entitled to that over 65 if they are not over 65, of course, and the parent is. So they would only receive the exemption at the percentage they own the property. As far as a married couple now, as long as it states on the deed or you are married at the time of purchase, then it is the exemption is at 100%. It's community property. Excuse me, sorry. So lots of time, but sometimes these deeds are not stating that they're a married couple. So we do try to do what we can do to check on the deed of trust at the time of purchase. Now, if you were unmarried at the time of purchase and married after, that ownership will still remain at 50-50. And you each would need to apply for your own exemption.
Okay. I'm trying to go back and answer or to get some of these questions that were in the chat, and I'm scrolling way too fast here because I know there's some that I'm missing. If somebody can't find their iFile number, or when they go to try to apply online for the protest, do they have to have that iFile number in order to protest? And if they can't find it, then how do they get a copy of it? Miss Alicia, you're on mute.
If they're trying to do the online protest, they do have to have that iFile number, because that is specific to their account. If they don't have it, they can. And if I'm not mistaken, John may be able to answer, do an open records request in order to get a copy of their notice. And that way they can get that iFile number, but that may take some time if the protest deadline is approaching, which for us is tomorrow.
Would they also be able to just get a generic paper protest form and file it that way?
They can file by paper, but they wouldn't be able to do the online protest because they need the iFile number.
Okay.
You can still file a protest, it just won't be online.
Right.
Okay. Okay, these questions are popping up in here so fast. I can't even keep up with them, what's being answered and what's not. And I'm still trying to check. So if you guys see any other questions that have popped up that I have not.
There was one other thing I did, I think I saw in passing and wanted to address, was, I should have mentioned the best indicator for market value of your home is if your home sold. I know I mentioned, if you had a recent purchase on your home. I know I also mentioned we're mainly looking at calendar year 2024 and then January of 2025. But I I mean, if we're trying to determine market value of your home, the best indication of your home's market value is if it actually sold on the market, on the open market. And so certainly if you've had a recent sale or purchase of your home, that's something you should protest and bring in and let us take a look at, make sure that's a valid open market transaction, and see if that's an appropriate market value for your home.
The property owner that asked about that purchased the home last month.
Ah, yeah, that's a bit far from January 1st at this point. Yeah, but if you purchased your home, certainly if you purchased your home during 2024 or real close to the start of 2025, that's definitely a relevant piece of information.
Okay. When there are repairs and things that need to be done on a home, when they are comparing your house to say a neighbor's house or whatever, and you know that there's a lot of damage, what kind of information do they need to present as part of the protest process when?
I'm assuming we mean a lot of damage to my home versus the ones I'm being
Correct.
compared to.
Correct.
Yeah, so photos are very helpful. Now let me give a caveat to that, because sometimes we'll get photos where it's, I can see 3 inches of a wall with a little ding in it. That doesn't give me as good of an idea of the condition of your home as, photos that are a little more comprehensive, that give me a little bit of a bigger view of your home. Then I can really kind of see what the condition of it is. So good photos of the condition of your home, as well as, if we're comparing you to something that's very different, if you've got photos of that to show us the difference, that helps. Like I said, repair estimates are very helpful in getting an idea of the extent of any damage and helping us kind of have a general idea of a number to put on it. Those are really two of the biggest things that we look for when we're considering condition issues. I know somebody had a question about do they need to have receipts? The repairs don't need to be complete. You don't need to have completed invoices or receipts. It can be an estimate from a contractor, but it should be something from someone official, from a contractor, from an insurance claim or something. Not
Uncle
just
Joe
I
that knows
created a
something.
Word document based on what I think it will cost me.
Yeah, not Uncle Joe that know a little bit about construction and a handyman. Yeah, no. Okay. When somebody's requesting a copy of the evidence package, generally how long does it take for them to get that once they applied for protest?
They're going to have it 2 weeks prior to their protest date. So whenever that is, we don't know when their protest date is going to be, but and they'll get that in the mail 2 weeks prior to that. They should have access to the evidence, because you can protest today, but we may not schedule your protests until later in the year.
Okay, and if once you've requested it and it's been 2 weeks, and you haven't gotten it, then what do you do?
No, not 2 weeks after, not 2 weeks after you protest, 2 weeks prior to your date.
To your date, right?
Yeah,
So
it is automatically available. It is automatically available to you at least 2 weeks before the date your hearing is scheduled for. So if you have that iFile number and you have that online portal and it's 2 weeks before your hearing, you should be able to go through your portal and have access to that HPAD evidence pack, and you'll be able to get it and download it right there.
Okay, so it's nothing somebody's going to email to you or send to you. You just got access. You got to go in there and get it.
Yeah, and there are. I'm trying to think. If you don't have that portal, you should be able to contact our office and get a copy somehow. But I'm not 100% sure on all of that process. But like I said, there's lots of good information about how you can get access to that evidence pack on your notice if you've got your notice.
Okay, I just want to make sure so people are not sitting back and waiting for something to come in the mail, that they know that they're supposed to do something to go and access it. So it's not just, like that. Ms. Thompson, you had another question. Did you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I had asked the question earlier up about if you guys can give us examples of when she said what's the word? I gotta find a question. She said that things that we could take for the house, like if we were protesting, things that we could use. And one of my examples was like, what if we in an area where we're next to the airport? Could that be something that we use to protest? Or if we have a retention pond like on the other side of our fence in the backyard, what can y'all give us some examples that we can use
Yeah,
of things we can use?
yeah. So I'm gonna try and be kind of general about this, but you know, some things that impact your home may impact just your home or just a few homes, and then some may impact the whole neighborhood. So, for example, the thing about being near an airport is probably pretty similarly impacting most of the homes in the neighborhood versus just a few specific homes. So there are some things that are going to kind of be a whole neighborhood issue, right? And if something is a whole neighborhood issue, we expect that that's pretty much going to be reflected in the sales of that neighborhood. When people buy in that neighborhood, they're typically aware that it's near an airport and that they're going to be hearing some air traffic noise and things of that nature. And so if it's impacting the whole neighborhood similarly, we're going to treat everybody equitably and see that that's reflected in the sales. But there are certainly things that may impact your home more specifically. So like a retention pond that only your house backs up to, or only a few homes back up to, things like that that are more specific to your property versus the others in your neighborhood are something that's going to be a bit easier to give some extra consideration to. Because again, we're having to make sure that we're being equitable for everybody as well. So if it's something that's fairly unique to your property or to just a few properties, that's going to be more helpful information than something that sort of hits the whole neighborhood, if that makes sense.
Does that answer for you? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I want to be mindful of everybody's time here. We are about a quarter after 3. Last question that was asked here. I get estimates and submit, then HCAD shows that the work was done. Regardless whether I say I am not doing the repairs, how do I back out upgrades / fixes that are not done yet? I'm not following that question, Miss Madeline.
I do.
Okay.
So a lot of times what will happen is somebody may come in and show us photos and estimates and say, here's the damage that I have to my home, or the deferred maintenance or condition issues, whatever the case may be. And what may happen is we may make a consideration for that for this year, and then estimate that maybe that's going to be taken care of by January of next year. And so we won't make a permanent adjustment to the characteristics of your home for that. We will give it some consideration for this year and assess it again next year. Or if we're told that, you know, repairs are not being done at this time, what we may do is we may put, we may make a note on that account to have someone go out and visit next year and see what the condition still is, whether repairs have been done. Now, again, every time we visit a property, we're working with the best information that we can get at that time. And so if we show up to a property and, you know, doors are closed, blinds are drawn, we can't really see anything about the interior condition of the home, and nobody is there and nobody answers the door to give us more information, and from what we can see from the outside, it looks okay, then we may estimate that those repairs have been done because we can't see just from the outside that there are issues. And so if we've got any indication that maybe repairs were in progress, then we may estimate that it's done, and that may be why then the next year it would look like we've credited you with repairs. And so again, it's the best information we're able to get at the time. And so then you would bring us that information again. You know, what we don't want to do, again, for being equitable for everybody, what we don't want to do is make a permanent adjustment to your account that says this property is in poor condition and then just leave it and never think about it again. Because then eventually you may do those repairs, and then that's not equitable for the other homes in the neighborhood that are at an average condition, and are not being valued as if they were in poor condition, or vice versa. And so we want to make sure that we're reassessing periodically to see, does it look like these repairs have been done? And you know, unfortunately, a lot of times we don't have access to what the interior condition is, and we will estimate that those are done, and you'll have to come in and show us evidence again that, you know, of the condition the next year.
Miss Mabel, or someone else, we've had this question come up too about the misconception between people thinking that they're having to renew their exemptions after 5 years. Can you explain what the verification thing is, and you know, the notice that people got or saw on the news or what have you about verifying or reapplying for your exemption after the 5 years?
Sure, and if I leave anything out, Sarah or Alicia can chirp in. But essentially, the Texas legislature, when they pass laws, there are, what is it, roughly 243 CADs in the state of Texas. While we're all charged with following the rules and of the property tax code and laws that the legislature puts in, there may be different procedures. That procedures for doing that may vary from CAD to CAD. When this rule was passed, I think, what, a couple of years ago, that said that all appraisal districts are now required to verify exemptions eligibility every 5 years. I found a lot of appraisal districts scammering to figure out how they were going to do that. However, HCAD's the way HCAD has been does theirs is we already had a procedure in place for that. That is that annual exemption confirmation card that I talked about earlier in the presentation. That goes out each year, as I mentioned before, in December or January. And that is to confirm what your exemptions are, what the exemptions that we currently have on your property. That's our way of auditing exemptions among Harris County property owners. And so we therefore it becomes the homeowner's responsibility to let us know if those exemptions are not correct, if something has changed, if the ownership has changed, or the person, exactly, if the ownership has changed, including the person having passed away, and maybe they had some family members move into the property. For instance, those family members would need to notify HCAD that those exemptions are not correct, and they would need to apply for their own. So what happens is that card, if it does go to the mail, it's not forwarded, it comes back to HCAD. That tells us that that ownership may have changed, and we are going to conduct an investigation to double check to make sure that that person is or is not still living in the home. If they're not, if we're unable to confirm, or if they're not, those exemptions are going to roll off eventually. So that is the mechanism for auditing exemptions within Harris County.
I wanted to make sure that that was kind of put out there because I've seen things all over social media scaring folks that their exemptions are going to automatically fall off after 5 years, and that they, the homeowners, have to reapply every 5 years. Please stop listening to the street committee and for those things that are online on social media that do not apply to the state of Texas. Get the information verified. Do not think that social media is gospel when it comes to certain things, especially like this. So do your research and do your homework.
Let me ask Linda. Linda, was there anything more that I needed to add to that?
Nope, you covered it very well. I was trying to think. No, I mean, as far as if there's an over 65 in place now, we will definitely, they will not come off automatically. We'll definitely, like you said, we'll investigate and see what is going on. And it's a process, and it's a lengthy process before those exemptions would even come off for someone who is over 65.
And it's important to add for people that may go, well, as long as they're on there, I'm not going to change anything, even though they belong to my dearly departed relative. It's important to know that this is your opportunity when you receive that to make those changes, to contact HCAD, because state law, if in fact, once we have proved that those exemptions are no longer, that the person living in that home is no longer eligible for the exemptions that were on the home, state law does allow appraisal districts to go back up to 5 years to charge for any underpayments that have been made as a result of someone living in a home and receiving exemptions they weren't eligible for.
So in other words, if Big Mama died more than 5 years ago, and you are still living in her house and you never took her name off and you are still claiming her over 65 exemption or disability exemption, they will find out and you owe the last 5 years of full valued property taxes plus interest and penalties. So do keep that in mind. Just know that. So later on, don't go tell your neighbor, oh, the county's trying to take my house and blah, 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 when you've been living there for the last up to at least 5 years without having that exemption removed. So make sure that if that is the case and indeed has not been swapped over, but a relative has passed, know that you are responsible now for however many years that they've been deceased and that exemption is still there, or for up to 5 years that
Right.
for up to
Yeah.
5 years. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Anytime and the ownership changes, you need to contact us and let us know, because like you said, if one of the parents passed away, or the owner, and you're just living there thinking, well, that's my parents and I inherit it, but we still have everything in your parents' name. That's your parents' exemption, not yours. And it's been a number of times where they passed away longer than 5 years, many years, and they never updated it. It's crucial to update that information.
Mhm. How many years, and this will be our last question because we are well over, how many years before somebody can go back and apply for an exemption?
For the IRE, the immediate residential homestead, you have 1 year from the date you acquire the property to apply for that immediate residence homestead. You may have lived in that property longer than you have owned it. It will still go by the date you acquired that property, 1 year. As far as the regular residential homestead or the over 65 or disability, you have right now you can go back as far as 2023. You can go back 2 years. Now, if you are a veteran and you want to apply for a disabled veteran exemption, you have 5 years. So,
All right. Thank y'all very much. Tomorrow is the deadline. If you have not yet applied for your protest, if you're not even sure if you want to follow through and not sure what you're doing, apply for the protest anyway. Just do it. You never know what's going to happen. Just apply for the protest. Protest, protest, protest. That's what we always tell
If you
folks.
think you might want to, go ahead and file your protest. You can always withdraw or just not show up if you decide it's not worth your time.
Real quick there too. If you apply for a protest and they make an offer for a protested value or an adjusted value, and then you decide to appeal it and say, nope, I want to go before or have my hearing anyway, can potentially the offer be off the table and now you're stuck with whatever it is that comes out of that hearing?
Yes, the offer is off the table. Once the offer is made and you don't accept, you start back over.
Okay.
So you can't go back and say, oh, I wanted to do nope, it starts over.
Every different
Mhm.
step of the hearing process is its own process. The ARB is not bound to consider anything that happened before you get to their room.
Okay, keep that in mind as well. I wanted to make sure that that did get brought up as well. So thank y'all very much. We did had well over 100 people that registered for this presentation for today that did have questions. So if I did not get to your question, I do apologize for trying to decipher or read through 100 registrations, plus keep track of the of the chat and social media. I do apologize if I did not get to your question. I do appreciate you guys for tuning in. If this is your first time attending any of the A Month of Service presentations, we want to thank you for joining. If you all have been here before, we want to thank you for continuing to come back and support the A Month of Service collaboration. There are a variety of different workshops that, again, that we do throughout the month. And I will include a copy of the calendar for for this month's workshops that we have remaining for the month. Coming up next week, we have our evictions presentation and knowing your rights, as well as our property tax foreclosure presentation is actually next Thursday at 1 p.m. So if your property taxes are past due and you are at risk of foreclosure, we are going to have attorneys that are going to be on the line explaining what that foreclosure process is like and how you can avoid it and what needs to be done and what legal resources are available to you to help stop that foreclosure. So definitely want to tune into that if that's an issue that you're having. So, but again, when you, at the end of this presentation, there's going to be a link for a survey that pops up. If you guys could take just a few minutes to fill out that survey to let us know if the information that you hope to receive here today is what you got. If there are additional questions, if there are additional workshops or presentations that you are interested in that that are pertinent to your family, your community, then please let us know. So as we're scheduling future months ahead, that's the only way that we'll know what it is that we need to plan according to what we get as feedback from the community members like you. So thank you, everybody, all of the team from HCAT that was addressing all the questions, John and Miss Linda, Sarah and Miss Alicia. Thank you guys very much, Miss Mabel, and then Shay that had to leave. We appreciate you guys for taking the time out this afternoon. We know that you are, again, on a deadline schedule, and I'm pretty sure that you guys are extremely busy. Again, to all of our participants, thank y'all. You all have a wonderful remainder of your day. Take care of yourselves. Look for the email of the recording of this session, the chat. All the questions that were in the chat will be included in the recording once you actually go back to watch it. You can also go back and watch on our YouTube channel at Amos Houston there for this presentation, along with some of the other presentations that we've done in the past as well. So you all take care of yourselves, stay safe. At this point, stay cool outside because, you know, we don't know how long this is going to last either. At least it's not humid outside, but it is hot. So take care of yourself, stay hydrated, and prepare for this year's hurricane season that's coming up. So I just want to make sure that everybody aware of that as well. So see y'all next time.
Thank you.
You.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh,